Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Elizabeth. I'm a writer, singer, lover of books, and today I'm going to convince you to read my favorite books by reading you a quote from each one. First book we're going to start with is The Virgin Suicides. This is a great book. I was going to try and pick out quotes that I don't think are common, and there's one that is common from this book. So for this book, I'm going to read you two of my favorite quotes because I don't want you to just get a quote that you've already heard before, but not everybody might have heard them, so I wanted to share. So the first quote I'm going to share for The Virgin Suicides is, "What are you doing here, honey? You're not even old enough to know how bad life gets." And it was then Cecilia gave orally what was to be her only form of a suicide note, and a useless one at that, because she was going to live. "Obviously, doctor," she said. "You've never been a 13-year-old girl." Brilliant. I'm pretty sure most people know that line, so I'm going to give you another one in case you already did hear that line. The next quote I'm going to share from The Virgin Suicides is, "During the dance, she made polite conversation, the kind beautiful young women make with dukes during waltzes in old movies. She held herself very straight, like Audrey Hepburn, whom all women idolize and men never think about." Next, we have The Lover by Marguerite Duras. I think I'm going to read you the opening. "One day I was already old. In the entrance of a public place, a man came up to me. He introduced himself and said, 'I've known you for years. Everyone says you were beautiful when you were young, but I want to tell you I think you're more beautiful now than then, rather than your face as a young woman. I prefer your face as it is now.'" Ravaged. Next book on my list is Black Swans by Eve Babbitt. This is a collection of different essays or short stories. And the quote that I'm going to read for you is, "Obsession born of jealousy still jealousy, or is it a new disease, a new mood? Is envy a common cold, jealousy a serious illness, and obsession a critical condition? Because jealousy sometimes seems like a critical condition, and then something can happen, a voice of reason can intercede, and the whole thing will vanish like morning dew. Sometimes I think that jealousy, like skiing, is only for those with enough youthful stamina and energy to endure it. As people get older, they finally give jealousy up, or at least they put it off for as long as possible until there is such incontrovertible evidence, like a husband saying, 'I'm leaving you for another woman who's much younger and cuter than you ever were,' that there's nothing to do but rise above it or succumb." The next book is My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell, another one where I would recommend looking up trigger warnings. So the quote I'm going to read is, "He's disgusted at me. I know what he thinks, what anyone would think, that I'm an apologist, an enabler, but I'm defending myself just as much as I am Strain. Because even if I sometimes use the word abuse to describe certain things that were done to me, in someone else's mouth, the word turns ugly and absolute. It swallows up everything that happened. It swallows me and all the times I wanted it, begged for it. Like the laws that flatten all the sex I had with Strain before I turned 18 into legal rape, are we supposed to make believe that that birthday is magic? It's as arbitrary a marker as any. Doesn't it make sense that some girls are ready sooner?" So heartbreaking. My all-time favorite. This book changed me in every way possible, and it is The Secret History. This was the hardest because I have so many passages that are underlined and look like that, but I found the one that I'm going to share with you, and it is this. "It is with him that I am most tempted to embroider, to flatter, to basically reinvent. I think that is because Julian himself was constantly in the process of reinventing the people and the events around him, conferring kindness or wisdom or bravery or charm on actions which contained nothing of the sort. It was one of the reasons I loved him, for that flattering light in which he saw me, for the person I was when I was with him, for what it was he allowed me to be." And that is The Secret History. The next book we have is Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. This is the only nonfiction book, I believe. I tend not to read nonfiction, but this storyline is so thrilling that you would think it was fiction. It is from the first chapter, on like the first page into the second page. "What I enjoy most," he said, "is living like an aristocrat without the burden of having to be one. Blue bloods are so inbred and weak, all those generations of importance and grandeur to live up to. No wonder they lack ambition. I don't envy them. It's only the trappings of aristocracy that I find worthwhile. The fine furniture, the paintings, the silver, the very things they have to sell when the money runs out, and it always does. Then all they're left with is their lovely manners." That is Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. The next book is The Invisible Life of Addie Larue. And the quote that I'm going to read to you from this one is, "There are 100 kinds of silence. There's the thick silence of places long sealed shut and the muffled silence of ears stoppered up. the empty silence of the dead and the heavy silence of the dying. There is the hollow silence of a man who stopped praying, and the airy silence of an empty synagogue, and the held breath silence of someone hiding from themselves. There is the awkward silence that fills the space between people who do not know what to say, and the taut silence that falls over those who do, but don't know where or how to start. Henry doesn't know what kind of silence this is, but it is killing him. The next book is Valley of the Dolls. It has come to my attention that when this was published, it was considered like trashy, not literature. And I think with time, it just gets sweeter, like a fine wine. This quote is pretty long. And again, with this kind of subject matter, I just don't see this book being trashy. I was beginning to wonder if any females over here recalled there was a war. Oh, I'm sure everyone felt the war. I can't agree. When you're over there, in it, you don't think there's anything else in life. You can't believe that somewhere people are sleeping in a comfortable bed or sitting in restaurants like this. It's different in Europe. Everywhere you walk, you see a bombed out building. You live with the constant reminder. But when I came back here, all of the death and bloodshed seemed so remote. It seemed that it couldn't have actually happened, that it was some hellish nightmare. There was New York. The Paramount Building was still standing, its clock running just as it always had. The pavements had the same cracks, and the same pigeons or their relatives were messing up the plaza. The same lines were standing out of the Copa, waiting to see the same stars. Last night I was out with a beautiful creature who spent hours telling me about the hardships she had endured during the war. No nylons, plastic lipstick containers, no bobby pins. It was awful. I think the shortage of nylons affected her the most. She was a model, and her legs were important to her. She said that she was terribly glad when we finally discovered the atom bomb. She had been down to her last 6 pair when it hit. I suppose if you're in it, nothing matters but getting out alive, she said quietly. You don't chance thinking even that far ahead, he answered. You think from day to day. If you allow yourself to think of the future, any personal future, you lose your nerve. And suddenly you recall all the senseless time-wasting things you've done, the wasted minutes you'll never recover, and you realize that time is the most precious thing, because time is life. It's the only thing you can ever get back. You can lose a girl and perhaps win her back or find another, but this second, when it goes, it's irrevocably gone. Next, we have another one of my all-time favorites, The Great Gatsby. It's not going to be an Elizabeth Girardi video without mention of The Great Gatsby. So again, I'm not going to just pick out like the beautiful fool quote because everybody knows that one, so I'm going to try and find one that maybe you haven't heard of. Oh, do you remember, she added, a conversation we had once about driving a car? Why, not exactly. You said a bad driver was only safe until she met another bad driver. Well, I met another bad driver, didn't I? I mean, it was careless of me to make such a wrong guess. I thought that you were a rather honest person, straightforward person. I thought it was your secret pride. I'm 30, I said. I'm 5 years too old to lie to myself and call it honor. And the final book we have is The Picture of Dorian Gray. I talk a lot about The Secret History and Picture of Dorian Gray and The Great Gatsby because those are my all-time favorites, but they also have many great quotes in them, so I thought they would be perfect for this video. And how charming he had been at dinner the night before. As with startled eyes and lips parted in frightened pleasure, he had sat opposite to him at the club, the red candle shades staining to a richer rose that wakening the wonder of his face. Talking to him was like playing upon an exquisite violin. He answered to every touch and thrill of the bow. There was something terribly enthralling in the exercise of influence. No other activity was like it. To project one's soul into some gracious form and let it tarry there for a moment. To hear one's own intellectual views echoed back to one with all the added music and passion of youth. To convey one's temperament into another as though it were a subtle fluid or a strange perfume. There was a real joy in that, perhaps the most satisfying joy left to us in an age so limited and vulgar as our own. An age grossly carnal in its pleasures and grossly common in its aims. That is The Picture of Dorian Gray. Thank you so much for watching. I'll have it linked down below where you could find me on Instagram or TikTok, and I hope you will subscribe so that you can continue to see my other bookish content.